are on mute. Your video is off, which is great because it saves bandwidth for the presentation. You will receive a survey after this presentation, so please provide your feedback. It helps us in developing future programs and finding out what we are missing in order to keep you guys happy and coming back. Let me see here. Here is our lineup for today. So we will have Mr. Shannon Dietz, and he will be talking about uh, beef. It's what's for dinner. I was going to try my Sam Elliott commercial voice for that, but I figured I better not try that. Next week, I will be speaking on giving an update on Harris County plant trials. We've been doing trials for a while, so we felt it would be a good idea to let you guys know what plans are performing well, how they're doing, and some of the work we've been doing in the background. And then on the 24th, Brandy Keller will be speaking on Cool Kid Plant Projects. So if you've still got the kids at home during school and you're looking for things to do to fill their time, some of these plant projects will probably help out. So with that, uh, Shannon, I think you are sharing your screen. You can go ahead and take it away. So again, this is Mr. Shannon Dietz, our Ag and Natural Resources agent here with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. Shannon?
All right, thank you, Paul. Coming through loud and clear on y'all's end and able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you again, Paul, for that introduction. I'm glad to be here with y'all presenting again on our weekly series of the Homegrown series. And this week, I thought I would change things up a little bit. And we've kind of been talking a lot about plants and horticulture and gardening series and so forth. So I thought I would take it a little further and bring it to the next step and show what animals actually eat grass and so forth, and that we get plenty of nutrition from, and people have they receive income from, and the state of Texas receives quite a bit of recognition for. So the title of my program today is called Beef, It's What's for Dinner. And if you're not salivating at this picture right now on the screen, hopefully you will be at the end of this program, because I'll tell you, whenever I put this PowerPoint together, I was literally making myself hungry for every screen I was putting together. And I was thinking, oh, that would be good. And a pot roast, that would be good on a barbecue, that would be good braising. And so we're going to kind of break that all down for you today and share some information with you that hopefully will help you if you have a family, how to prepare meats for your family, what's the most economical cuts of beef for your family, and so forth. And then we're going to take it a kind of a step a little bit further. We're going to actually explain some of these cuts of beef so that whenever you might actually get to go out again after COVID-19 and you're maybe on a date night with your significant other, your husband, your wife, or what have you, you will know what kind of choice of beef to select when you're out at a nice steakhouse or what have you, if you don't already have a favorite picked. So with that being said, we're going to go through and share a little bit of information, like I said, in general about beef today. What we're going to do is get started with is kind of share a little bit of information about how beef came to be evolved as one of the major economic drivers here in the state of Texas. And as you know, Texas is associated with the cowboy, and it is associated with beef cattle, most significantly the Longhorn cattle, which my coworker Brandy Keller really likes. So they are really great cattle to look at and everything, and they are definitely a symbol of Texas. But one of the things that we want to share with you today is that when the settlers first arrived in the United States, they brought over European cattle, and there is actually European cattle, and those tend to have a lot more hair on them, because in the European countries, There's a lot more colder climates and so forth, and you don't really see that much in the South here. Those European cattle started to breed by mistake or what have you, with some of the cattle that we had here in the southern United States that crossed in from Mexico and the Spanish territories, and we started to develop a lot more American breeds and so forth like that. And like I said, the King Ranch is known for developing quite a few heads of cattle. The Longhorn cattle is just to name a few, and it is one of the largest working ranches, if not, I think, the largest working ranch in the state of Texas. Cattle, the second one there, you see, sold originally for $1.50 a head just after the Civil War. There was such an abundance of cattle in the United States, especially in the southern part and the eastern part, that they really weren't getting much of profit from it. Can you imagine buying a whole head of cattle for just $1.50? But what they found out was when they had the gold rush getting ready to start happen out in the West, out in Alaska and California and different areas like that, Nevada and everything, they started to see a lot more return for their investment. And they were able to get about $30 to $40 a head. So that's whenever the cattle trail was kind of invented. And a lot of you might remember some old Western movies, and everything is one of my favorite movies, or types of movies, is whenever you used to have the cattle trails that would go on for months and months and months. And these would be cowboys that would come in from everywhere. Hollywood kind of symbolized it as a real glamorous life and everything, but they lived day to day. The majority of people, or the cowboys, didn't own their horses, but they did own their saddle, which was kind of neat thing. And then the cook was usually about the second highest paid on the cattle trail, earning about $60 a month. And then the trail boss earned about $100 and $150 a month. So you can see we've come a long way in wages with that. As we talked about, beef is big in Texas. We are the third largest economic generator, or beef is the third largest economic generator in the state of Texas. Cotton and corn are up there among the number 1 and 2. In 2015, about $12 billion went into the state economy. And Texas ranks as number 1 in the nation in total number of cattle and cows. And that due primarily to our large amount of space that we have here in Texas, especially out West Texas, where you have a lot of land that is not able to be put into any type of row crop or anything. They're basically only good for cattle grazing and so forth. So that's where we get a lot of that land to be able to run a lot of those cattle and calves. We do have a lot of feedlots, mostly up in the Panhandle and out West Texas as well, where we have a lot of packing facilities where cattle go to slaughter and everything. So we actually have the full, business here, from hoof to slaughterhouse, if you will. All right. So we talk about beef and everything. And one thing that I want to talk about today and stress is that I'm not, I know there are a lot of vegetarians out there. I know there are a lot of people that are not big on beef and so forth. What I want to suggest is, and tell you up front, is that we recommend beef in moderate amounts. We're not saying that you need to go out and eat beef every day and so forth like that. But there are certain qualities that beef has that the human body needs in order to work properly and so forth. So we just want to share some of those things with you today and let you know that, there's always different studies going on with different type of, studies that say butter is bad for you, or eggs are bad for you, or beef is bad for you, and everything like that. So again, keep in mind that we're talking about in moderation here. So one of the biggest things that beef does is help build protein. With beef, you actually get, it was kind of funny because you actually get 10 essential nutrients from a 3-ounce serving of beef. And you actually receive over half the daily allowance of protein from a 3-ounce serving of beef. In addition to that, it helps our immune system with our B vitamins and zinc. One of the things I came across is that yeah, say for example, when comparing zinc, you would need to eat a 20-ounce piece of portion of chicken breast in order to receive the same amount of zinc that you would in a 3-ounce serving of beef and so forth. It also goes on to support hormone production. And one of the big ones is it replenishes iron in your body. And I'm not sure if a lot of you know this, but there are two different ways that iron can be absorbed into the body. And one of them is heme and the other one is non-heme. The one that is most absorbable into the body comes from animal products or beef, if you will. And so that's easily broken down into the body as opposed to non-heme, which is your plant-based products and so forth. So it is definitely good for people who have low iron in their body and so forth. A 3-ounce serving of beef definitely can help you out with that. Here's a little a diagram. I thought that was really good. We talked about the 10 essential nutrients that a serving of beef supplies, and this gives a good breakdown here. We talk about iron, choline, protein, vitamins B6 and B12, phosphorus helps build bone and teeth, zinc helps maintain a healthy immune system, niacin, riboflavin, and selenium. And then you can see that on average, 51% of protein comes from a 3-ounce serving of cooked beef, and it only provides 175 calories. All right. So I thought that was really good there to share that diagram with you. Couple things, if you're at the grocery store, I know I can remember going to the grocery store with my mom when I was a lot younger, and I grew up in the country. So luckily we had grocery stores, and we also had meat markets that we were able to shop with. Grocery stores kind of tended to be where my mom would pick up most of the bulk items and everything, but she would actually go to a meat market, our local meat markets, to purchase beef and so forth. And that was a different time and day. But right now, actually, meat markets are actually making a comeback. So if any of you would like to know about more meat markets around here, where you can buy beef from individual producers, we do have quite a few of them. We don't see a lot of beef being produced here in Harris County anymore, but we do have a lot produced around the area. And what they do is they come in a lot of times, especially during the farmers market. And I'm gonna give a shout out to Urban Harvest, how well they do with securing producers from around the Harris County area to come in. One of the favorite ones that I like to go to is on every Saturday morning. It's at the corner of Westheimer and Buffalo Speedway in the St. John School parking lot. I've got to be really good friends with a lot of the meat producers there. Not only beef, they have Wagyu beef. If you're looking for any of that special beef, that Japanese beef with high amounts of marbling in it, but they also have producers there that are with poultry, your ducks and your chickens. They have pork producers, and they have a variety of beef producers as well. And you can buy individual cuts. They're all frozen. And they're packaged, ready to go and take home. So, but if you don't have that luxury and you're at the grocery store and everything like that, and you're shopping with 10 or 15 people other around you, and they're kind of looking to see what the sale items are and what you can do best to feed your family and so forth on the amount of meat and the budget that you have. These are going to be a couple examples of that you want to look for when selecting those types of beef. Beef should always be red or red purple in color without any brown discoloration. All right, if you have any brown discoloration, that usually means that there's air that has gotten to that. If there might be a hole in the cellophane wrapper or what have you, or it might be an older piece of meat that might have been put in the back and they're trying to sell it for a discount price and so forth. So you definitely want to make sure that your meat has a nice red, purple color and that it is cold. If you pick it up and you touch it and it doesn't have a cold feeling on your hand right away, it's got any kind of warm feeling, you definitely do not want that, okay? That is a sign that you want to definitely stay away from. If you can smell the meat, if it doesn't smell fresh, keep on looking. One of the things that I am always leery about is when I walk into a grocery store and it gives off a smell and you can smell like the place isn't clean. That's kind of a bad red flag for me. I tend to like certain grocery stores that I shop at. I'm very picky when it comes to seafood and meat and different things like that. So I think you should be as well. Make sure that if you can, and also I want you to know to develop a relationship with the people working behind the counter. This is a great thing because even though we live in the city of millions of people, there are certain grocery stores that I go to here that I've gotten to know really well. That butchers, meat cutters that work behind the counter. And this is a good relationship to have, especially if you continuously purchasing meat or anything, you can develop that relationship with them and they can help you out when things are on items are on sale. They can do special cuts for you. They can do special trims for you. If there's a piece of meat that you want to get a little extra trim off of, take some of the fat. That goes a long ways when you develop those relationships with those people. Again, I want to let you know too, this is off side note. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to post those in the chat box on the side, and either Brandy or Paul or somebody will get those, or we can answer them at the end. So feel free to answer your questions or ask your questions, and I'll get those answered at the end. No moisture in the packaging. The longer it sits there, there will be moisture that develops in the packaging. So usually if there's a lot of moisture in the packaging, drainage from the meat and everything, that means it's been sitting there for a while. And we're going to talk a little bit about marbling in a couple of slides after that. Next thing we want to talk about is, why do prices vary? You can see that whenever you go to the grocery store, there are going to definitely be your high-end cuts of meat, and you're going to definitely have your low-end cuts of meat. Basically, what that means is the more tender the meat, the less you need to cook it, so the more it costs, all right? So, when we talk about our tenderloins, our ribeyes, our New York strips and different things like that, those are going to be more of your tender cuts of meat, as opposed to your chuck roast, your shanks, and different your brisket. Even though the brisket kind of rule doesn't apply a lot of times because it has gotten so expensive here in Texas. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. The tender cuts always come from the middle part of the animal. This is the reason why your ribeyes that come from the rib rack, your prime rib, your New York strips, your T-bones and all of that, because those areas don't get a lot of use with the animal. Okay, so like your neck, your shoulders, your shank, what comes from the legs, your rump and so forth like that, those muscles are going to be used a lot more in the life of the steer. So those muscles tend to be more tough. And so, but you don't usually see a lot of muscle usage in the middle part of the steer. So that's why that comes to happen there. In Texas, barbecue is king. So remember I talked about the cuts like brisket and ribs and everything, not so much cheap anymore. Brisket has really jumped up in price over the last couple months or so, I would actually say. And brisket is basically a really tough meat to cook. If you can become a pro at cooking brisket, you will be known on your neighborhood as the king of the barbecue, because it takes slow cooking and everything. And people who can really get a really good brisket to cook, tender and flavorful for people to eat off of, that's a really good quality to have. Okay, next we're going to talk a little bit about purpose of beef grating. I apologize about that. I'm not sure if a lot of you have heard of the term marbling before, but there's a picture on your slide right now, and we talk about the three different quality cuts. I'm sure most of you have heard these before. We're talking about USDA Prime, Choice, and Select. And that is how the USDA grades pieces of meat. So when a steer is slaughtered in a slaughterhouse, between the 12th and the 13th rib, there is a cut made in the side of beef, and that is where they determine the amount of marbling in that particular side of beef. A lot of times it's done mechanically. It used to be done visually, but now it's done mechanically. They actually can put a camera on it, and it can take an infographic of the amount of marbling in there, and it will determine whether it's prime, choice, or select. So it takes the human error out of it. And you can definitely see in the picture there how marbling is affected. Okay, and marbling, basically what we want is marbling is the amount of distribution of intramuscular fat. And that fat is going to give us flavor. All right. Everybody's going to have different, feelings about fat and everything. But we're not talking about like on that USDA Prime, you see that fat ring around, and all of them actually that fat ring on the outside. That's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about that intramuscular fat, that marbling, those white strips of marbling of fat on the inside. You can see in that select piece, there's hardly any marbling. So that is not going to be as flavorful as a piece of meat, and usually as tender as that USDA Prime. Now that USDA Prime is probably going to be $10 or $15 more per T-bone or ribeye or what have you, versus that select piece. A lot of times choice is a good way to go because it is middle of the road, and you still get some good amount of marbling in there. Next, we're going to talk about the 8 primal cuts of beef. And every steer that goes through the slaughterhouse is going to be broken down. It's going to be split down the middle, and it's going to come through the rack, and it's going to have the 8 cuts of beef that we're going to go through and talk about today. And those are divided into the chuck, the rib, the loin, which is broken down here into the short loin, the bottom, the tenderloin, and the sirloin. Okay, that's all counted as one. So we got the chuck, the rib, the loin, the round, the brisket up in the front, the plate, which is the underbelly, and the flank, which is the back underbelly, and your 2 shanks, which are, just above the feet and so forth. So we're going to go through and talk about each one of these. This is one of the links that I have that they're sharing with you in the chat box today. This is a great diagram of different cuts of beef, and it actually goes through and talks about different ways to cook them that you can get the most flavor and the how to cook it. Because if you do cook beef wrong, it doesn't matter how much you paid for it, you're going not going to be disappointed. I mean, you're going to be disappointed with the outcome. So you definitely want to make sure that you're cooking the right kind of beef with the right cooking method. And with that being said, you have here basically 2 different ways. You have tough cuts of beef and tender cuts of beef. And then we're going to go through these, like I said, as we go through the PowerPoint. But your tough cuts of beef tend to be your chuck, your round, and your brisket. And those cooking methods usually are broken down into braising, stewing, boiling, and slow cooking. All right. Your tender cuts of beef, your ribeye, sirloin, and so forth like that, usually do better on dry methods. And that's usually like the barbecuing, the grilling, not so much the frying, but really that's where you see a lot of charcoal grills, a lot of gas grills, and different things like that. So I'm actually even experimenting with my air fryer on how to get that done. I know I'm probably putting a knife through a lot of people's hearts here when I say the air fryer with a piece of beef in it, but I'm definitely starting off with some of the pieces of beef that need to be cooked at a higher temperature, your tougher pieces of beef, working with those as opposed to my tender cuts. I would never want to do that in an air fryer or something. That's definitely going to go on the grill. So shopping for your family, one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about is know the cow and know your cuts. If you're looking for a particular roast or something, you're going to be getting that from your chuck or your round. All right. If you're looking for ribs, beef ribs or short ribs, your ribs can either come from the rib section or the short plate section. We already talked a little bit about why prices vary in meats. Everybody should be familiar with that now. You'll see that on the diagram, that short loin, the rib, and the sirloin. It kind of gives you an idea right now. That's in the middle part of that steer there. So you'll see that those cuts of beef are usually going to go a higher price than opposed to your chuck, your round, your foreshank, and your flank and so forth like that. Some of the leanest cuts to beef to cook are going to be around the flank area. Those are usually don't have a lot of fat content on them, and those are usually can be sliced up and used a lot in stir fries and fajitas and so forth and everything. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. But this is a good reference to keep coming back to for future. So we're going to go ahead and get caught up with some of our cuts of beef now. And a steer is divided up into two different sections. We call the forequarter cuts and the hindquarter cuts. The first one we're going to do is the forequarter cuts, which is the area of the chuck, the rib, the short plate, and the brisket and so forth. All right. This is the beef chuck primal. That's the one of the 8 that we talked about. And you can see some pieces of beef down below. The first one is a 7 steak. I remember growing up, a lot of times my mom would cook this. She would braise it, cook it in a skillet with a lot of gravy. It would cook for a lot of time. It would break down really easy. It's very muscular, but it tends to be cheaper and it's good for pot roasts and stews. In the middle part, we have a chuck roast, and the last picture is another picture of a chuck roast, but that has been just trimmed down. So plenty of flavor, tend to be cheaper, and you can get a lot of meat for the amount of price. So if you have a big family to cook for and you cook it the right way, this is a great piece of meat to go for. Next is the beef rib primal. This is where you're going to get into the area of some of the more expensive cuts. These are going to be the cuts that you want to do for special occasions, or again, these are the cuts that usually are selected or promoted, I guess, if you will, at like a lot of the higher end steakhouses and different things like that. These are the ones that are going to be cooked on dry heat, usually on open flame or charcoal or gas grills and so forth. And we're talking about the ribs. There's 13 ribs on the side of a steer. All right. So the primal rib begins after the 5th rib and runs to about the 12th rib. And this is where we're going to get, like I said, a lot of the higher end, the ribeyes, the prime rib roast. Short ribs sometimes will fall. Basically, short ribs are at the end of the rib cut. And so they can either fall in the beef rib primal section or the short plate. Actually, short ribs are some of my favorite meats to cook. They do really well braised in like a wine reduction. And it is an amazing piece of meat. You do get a lot of meat for it. They tend to be a little bit higher price, but they're definitely worth it. If you have not cooked short ribs before, definitely put that on your list to try. The beef plate primal, okay? You can see that this is what's gonna sit below the rib. This is kind of in the underbelly area. It's rich and flavored. Got a lot of marbling in it. You can see in those pictures, it's got a lot of fat, which is going to, again, give you a lot of flavor. It is area known for giving us our skirt steak, which has become really, really popular over the last couple of years. A lot of people use this for fajitas. Skirt steaks are actually hard to get now, actually, in grocery stores, because the restaurants have picked up on the flavor and the value of it. And they can incorporate it in so many different recipes now that it's very rarely seen and sold actually at the grocery stores and everything. So if you can get it, it's a great piece of meat to cook. But like I said, if you don't, Um, if you're not able to find it in a grocery store, you can usually find it in the restaurants and so forth. Beef brisket primal. Okay, this is the area that most people in Texas know and associate again with Texas. Your brisket, popular and recognized as one of the every barbecue place that you go to, every country fair, county fair, every kind of festival you go to, you're going to have brisket. Buc-ee's has a great chopped brisket sandwich and so forth. Best cooked low and slow. You usually see these cooked in smokers, where you're able to put it in at a certain temperature and just kind of leave it in there. And it's not usually something you cook on the stove or anything. You see a lot of people cooking these on the grill or on a smoker or something. A lot of times they'll wrap them to hold that tenderness in, that juiciness in, with aluminum foil and so forth. So everybody has their own trick with it. It does take a lot of seasoning because it is a large piece of meat. There are two pieces of meat shown here, but both of these are considered brisket. All right. So if you would actually take both of those pictures and put them together, the one on the right is actually the brisket tip, and the one on the left is actually the full brisket, but you can see how that tip was cut off, and they can actually sell two different pieces of brisket for the same amount of money. But again, if you want a smaller cut of brisket, that tip area is going to be probably easier to cook. It's going to be less tougher, and it's made for a smaller family as opposed to the full brisket. A lot of times too, if you're working with a butcher or a meat cutter at a place, at a grocery store, you can get them to trim the brisket because sometimes they do come with a large amount of fat on them. And if you're not familiar with how to cut or trim that at your house, if you have a good relationship with a butcher, they can actually get to do that for you. All right. Beef shank primal. This is one of the ones that probably a lot of people don't really know about. It's probably one of the least popular pieces of beef. You can see on the diagram there, the shank comes from the front and the back. You usually get what this is they're usually braised. And if you've ever had the dish ossobuco, this is where that piece of meat comes from. You can see that we use it other than that in stews and soup. But other than that particular dish, it's not a real popular cut of meat. You don't normally see it so much in the grocery store. With a lot of the other meats, you would need to go to like a specialty cuts place or get them to cut it specially for you. All right. Next is the hind quarter cuts. Okay, so now we finished with the front quarter. Now we're talking about just the hind quarter. All right. The first one is going to be our beef loin primal, which we're talking about. And this is where our most expensive cuts of beef come from on that steer. It's not heavily muscled. Remember, it's up on that top part, that back area. So it doesn't have a lot of muscular work out there. These are three pictures of meats that come from that particular area. Up on the top, you'll see the long strip is actually the beef tenderloin, which is a very, very expensive piece of meat. Or it can actually be broken down into those subcuts, and that's where you get your filet mignon from. Okay. The middle cut pictures are going to be your New York strip steaks that come from that area as well. A very popular cut in steakhouse restaurants and so forth. And the bottom picture is going to be a sirloin. And you can see the loin. We talked about the loin has two different parts. The short loin and the sirloin. Your short loin is going to give us those New York strips, your T-bones, and your fillets. Your sirloin is going to be a little bit more muscular because it is towards the end, towards the rump of the animal. It's still good and still flavorful, and that's where you're going to get your sirloin steaks from. Okay, most popular form of steak there. Beef round primal. This is coming from the rear of the animal. This is the butt of the steer. So you're going to have a lot of large muscles in this particular area. If you look at a steer, when it's grazing out on the grass, you can see the muscles just under that covering. So you know that it's going to be a heavily muscled area. Usually does well in stews. A lot of people or a lot of grocery stores, butchers, meat cutters, and everything usually tend to ground this up for ground beef and so forth. It is good for a family budget. You do get a lot of meat for your price, especially like in a roast. I'm a big proponent of roast. They're cooked really, if you cook them really well and cook them low and slow for a long time, and I say a couple hours, depending on the amount of roast that you have, the weight of the roast. My mother was always known for cooking a really good beef roast in the summer and pork roast in the winter when butchering happened and so forth like that. And a little tip on some of these roast guys, if you take them, not only do you want to season them externally, but you want to season them internally. So like if I would take a roast like this bottom picture here, and I would cut probably about 5 or 6 pockets with a little paring knife and go down about 1 inch or 2 into the cut of meat. And I would cut up some garlic. I would cut up some bell pepper, put some salt and pepper in there, and put a little bit of vinegar and mix it all together. Vinegar acts as a tenderizer, and you mix all that up, and you in your pocket, you would take like a tablespoon of each one of those and stuff that seasoning down into the pocket of that roast and let it marinate from the inside out. You're going to get a completely different flavor from that piece of meat, and it's going to help really with the overall flavor. And you won't be just getting that seasoning on the outside. You're going to be getting it on the inside as well. Cut up a little bit of onion in there too. That's what else I forgot. And that'll help too. The picture up at the top is the eye of round. That is one of the most toughest pieces of meat on the animal. It usually is probably one of the cheaper pieces of meat. They usually sold like in cutlets, as you see there. They take a long time to cook. They don't have a lot of marbling in them. As you can see, they're very lean, so they're not going to be very juicy or anything. So you have to be careful when you're cooking them that they don't dry out. So it's a tough piece of meat. It's a tricky piece of meat to cook and then be able to get a good response back from if you're really wanting to impress some people or anything like that. I definitely would. It's more of a utilitarian piece of meat, but again, if it's cooked right, it can do well for you. The beef flank primal. I think this is one of our last 8, the primal cuts. It is below the loin. Has long fibers in it, long muscle fibers. If you could see the picture on, if you see the picture on the left-hand side, you can see how those fibers run from left to right throughout that whole piece of meat. And so with that being said, this is cooked really well. Like if you're going to do fajitas or something, or if you're doing stir fry, this is another piece. It's not as thin as the skirt steak, and it's not as flavorful, but if you cut it up into thin slices and you cook it like in a stir fry or something like that, anytime you're going to have meat that has high muscling in it, other than like a roast or something, but that is manageable, that you can cut up into smaller pieces, that is going to allow the muscle to break down a lot easier. All right. As if you, instead of you keeping it whole, like if you were to keep that flank steak whole and cook it without cutting into it at all or anything like that, you would have a hard time with tenderness on it and so forth. The cut on the right-hand side is your London Brawl cut. A little bit thicker cut. It's it used to be real popular in the restaurants and so forth as a steak selection and so forth. Not so much anymore. It's more of a specialty cut now. You don't really see it a lot in the grocery stores, but it is still out there. All right, guys. So that is the end of my program today. You know, I hope that everybody got some information on how to cook their cuts of beef that are going to be accepted by your family and friends and so forth. Kind of gave you some ideas on new cuts of beef that you might want to try in the grocery store. Again, check out some of those independent producers and so forth around the areas. They're getting more and more popular. I know there are several grocery stores that around the Houston area that are very good for their cuts of beef and everything. And I that's where I get my cuts of beef. But if I want specialty cuts of beef and everything, I have a relationship with other producers around the area, and they're not hard to find, and they're not far to travel to. You can find them in Fort Bend, Waller, counties like that and so forth. So farmers markets are a good place to do that. Those independent producers, they work hard for their money, and you can ask them any questions on cooking methods. They can tell you how long to cook it for, what it's going to be best to be used with, and so forth and everything. So try out some of those independent producers as well. And also in the and when you're filling out the survey, there will be a survey that will be coming out after this. If you would like to see more programs like this that talk about beef, or if you would like for me to do like cooking presentations, I can work on that with the FCH agents. Or if you would like to do stuff, see stuff on pork or poultry or anything like that, feel free to give comments on that and let me know, and I can read through those. So with that being said, we're going to go through, see if there's any questions to answer right now. Brandy and Paul.
Hi, Shannon. Right now there aren't any questions. I have a feeling this will be a topic that they have to think about, and then they'll probably come up with some questions later today. Anyone that's on here, do you still have any questions? We've gotten some thank yous, and Julie did post a bunch of links. So if you are on here right now, when you click on those links, it will pop up in a separate window. So you'll be able to reference those later. So that way you're not wondering what were those links that they posted. So someone said, could you repeat the ingredients to put in the pockets of the roast?
Oh, yeah. So this is just my recipe that's been handed down through generations. So it's basically about a half a cup of minced onion, about a half of a bell pepper cut up in minced, and about a teaspoon of minced garlic, some salt and pepper, and a couple tablespoons of vinegar, and mix those all together in a little bowl. And you should have like a really good flavor combination going on there. And again, it's how you want to adjust it to, if you like more onion flavor in it, if you like more garlic flavor in it. The vinegar will actually help tenderize the meat. So you can adjust it to however you want. It's just what I use. And like I said, you want to go about 1 inch to 1.5 inch pocket into the roast with a little paring knife, and stuff that in there really, really good, and let it sit for a while before you actually put it in the oven, because you want those flavors to incorporate throughout the piece of meat. You don't want to go into the oven right away. So let it marinate for a little while in a cool setting. Remember, you always want to keep cool meats cool, hot meats hot. So practice food safety. Always wash your hands before and after in dealing with any types of meats or anything like that. So that's what I use on my my stuffing.
All right, and the last question I see ask, whenever Julie cooks her roast in the slow cooker, it's really tough. What is the best cut of meat? And I'll just ask you, Shannon, if this is correct. Whenever I have a roast in a slow cooker, for me, 100% of the time to make it not tough is the length of time. The longer I leave it in there, the more tender it gets.
Yeah. Because you're talking about roast. Remember, you're talking about a roast, so that's a big piece of meat, and if it's gonna come from the shoulder area, if it's gonna come from the rump area, it's gonna have a lot of muscle in it. So again, like in a slow cooker, I would say, depending on the temperature you would have it, but it's not gonna burn as opposed to like an oven or anything. So at least 5-6 hours, maybe even 7 hours, to really have that that muscular breakdown. That, and if you cook it high and fast, you're not going to have that muscle breakdown. So that's correct, Brandy. The longer you cook it, yes, the more tender it will be.
All right, and we don't have any other questions. Sanja did say that the amount of liquid, I've never really had a big issue with liquid in pot roast, but that could definitely play in there too. But we don't have any other questions, so it looks like you're good.
Well,
thank you.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate it, and coming to y'all each time and sharing this information with y'all. And keep in mind that on September 17th, Paul's going to be doing the update on Harris County plant trials, and on the 24th, Brandy is going to be doing Cool Kid plant projects. So if that's about it, enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope you go get some beef and are able to barbecue this weekend, because I think I definitely will be. So support your local producers, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Brandy.